month we have a theme. The theme this month is green. So when you think about green, you might think about the environment. Who cares about the environment? Anybody here interested in environmental concerns? Let's get our first speaker up here. Let's bring him on up to the stage. As I said, David Cooch, sort of broad outline, was a juice man and is now fully invested in the environment, making changes for the better and in the environment, including for those of us who drive cars. So let's welcome to the stage Mr. David Cooch.
Kick off this green talk about one of my favorite topics, probably just second to money in the green space, which is climate. Just a quick poll of the audience. How many people here believe in climate change? Excellent. This is Boston, WGBH, what I would expect. And in fact, the country is more and more moving in this direction. We're seeing across this country now about 70% of people identifying as being concerned with climate change. The number is going up, and despite what's happening on a political level, there's reason for optimism, and I think one of the most important things we have to do is recognize just the basic fact that climate change is happening, and it's an incredibly serious problem. But before I get into climate change too much, and I'll always like to keep a little bit of optimism when we talk about climate change, so I'm going to keep it optimistic, guys, don't worry. And before I get into green gas and what we're doing to make climate change much easier for folks, I'm just going to give a little bit about my upbringing and what brought me here. So I was born in Vermont, and that gave me just a love of nature, my exposure to this beautiful countryside that I lived in. And pretty early on, it was around the time when Al Gore came out with the incredible film about educating people on climate change. I'm somehow blanking on the name right now. Inconvenient Truth, of course. And I was 8 years old at the time, I believe, and I immediately was completely bought in. I'm like, this is absolutely happening. What are we going to do about it? Sort of fast forward to college, I'm studying biology, and in my mind, I'm going to save the world by being a biological scientist. I pictured myself, measuring the coral reefs and been, counting bird populations and sort of living this idyllic lifestyle of actually helping the environment while still getting to live it and enjoying it. And after college, I manifested that dream immediately. I went as a research assistant and lived in Costa Rica for 6 months, and I helped conserve sea turtles. And this was just an amazing experience. And just to give you just a little bit about sea turtles, they're incredible species. They always return to nest on the beaches that they were born on. So in my remote area in Costa Rica, sea turtles who were born there 50, 60 years ago are coming back to lay their eggs and continue their population. Sea turtles, massive, like many aquatic species in all over the world, are in major danger, and it's due to human activity. And I sort of left that experience realizing that my localized approach to just sort of helping this one population of sea turtles on this one beach, while the greater forces at play that are really damaging the environment continue to happen unimpeded, regardless of my efforts to try and help this small population. And also the pay wasn't great. But so after 6 months, my job there was over, and I returned to Boston and was sort of thinking, what can I do to help better in the environment than on more of a, and address the symptom, not address the symptom, but actually address the cause. And so naturally, my next move was to start a juice company. And this sort of fell into my lap, and it became a great adventure. Jubilee, not sure if anyone recognizes the name, but we're a Boston-based juice organic smoothie company we were around for a couple years ago. We phased out, but we were around on the scene for a few years, and in any case, we had a strong ethos of organic food, locally sourced food, and of course, health and nutrition is really important. These are also core values of mine that I think go a long way towards helping out, us being in a position to better the world. So you have to take care of yourself first. And from a climate perspective, locally sourced ingredients is also quite important. But one thing we thought as we grew and we were sending all these plastic bottles out the door of our juice products, and we knew they were being driven by gas-powered cars to get to their end destination. Like we can do more, we think. What else could we do to make our business a bit more environmentally responsible? And so then came the idea of carbon offsetting. Now this is another, I'm very curious to know, who in the audience is familiar with a carbon credit or a carbon offset? Great, so that's about 10 people raised their hands. So, and this is something that we had to learn a little bit about too. So what we can do with a carbon offset is you can calculate how much carbon, which is just I know we all believe in climate change here, but quick overview so we're good. Climate change is caused by greenhouse gases, most notably carbon dioxide, that is released into the atmosphere where it traps heat, prevents it from being released, leads to global warming. So what we can do with one of our juices, for example, is calculate exactly how much carbon went into the growing process, the apple being sent over to our facility, our energy use, our packaging, and then us sending it out. We can calculate how much carbon is in that juice, how much carbon pollution was behind the creation of that product, and then you can pay a fee to offset that carbon. And we were amazed by how cheap it was. For a juice that you could buy at Whole Foods for $8 or $9, you could make it carbon neutral for an additional 5 or 10 cents. And we were also amazed by the positive reception we got from our customer base. People really appreciated this offering and they wanted it. And it got to thinking, well, this is great, we like this, but there must be, this concept has other applications, and there are other ways that we can use the same concept to have much greater impact. And so green gas, the idea was born. Green gas is a carbon offsetted gasoline. Now I'm going to talk about carbon offsets for a second because I know most of the crowd is not familiar. So let's talk about, for example, a project that is, or an organization rather, that is planting trees. And they have taken a large swath of land that has been deforested or is not being used to its maximum environmental benefit, and they begin this huge operation to plant, let's say, for example, 1,000 acres of trees. And then scientists and third-party certifiers can come in and measure how much carbon dioxide these trees are responsible for removing from the environment. And as most of us are probably aware, trees, through photosynthesis, remove carbon dioxide from the environment and spit out oxygen. They're the lungs of the planet. So back about 20 years ago, projects such as these and other projects, including renewable energy, were granted this international approval to sell, if they were proven to have carbon negative activities, such as tree planting projects and renewable energy, then they can then sell those benefits to an individual or a company or even a country that wants to offset their negative carbon emissions. And when it comes to gasoline, this is quite a simple calculation. Well, it's about 19 pounds. Every gallon of gas that your car burns emits about 19 pounds of carbon dioxide into the environment. And what we can do, and what we have done, is created a way for you for just 10 cents per gallon to fund a project such as renewable energy or tree planting that will remove that carbon dioxide from the environment. So this is the whole concept behind green gas. And one of the most interesting things to me about this is we know about climate change, right? And it's quickly every year we understand it's becoming a bit more dire. The need to act is becoming quicker and quicker, more urgent. And yet you see a very slow change in behavior. We're still eating the same, we're still driving our cars, you are still taking many plane flights, and carbon emissions are continuing to go on the rise. And solutions such as electric vehicles, for example, vegetarian diets, that's a very reachable green activity you can take, but it's a tough one to give up for people. I haven't been able to do it myself, and I care deeply about the environment. Plane flights, it's a huge carbon footprint on an individual basis, and yet I am absolutely looking forward to the trip I'm taking to Colombia soon, and I'm going to do it. And so I personally have a bit of acceptance. I think despite the doom and gloom of climate change, I don't think it's worth shaming people, or we should accept the fact that it is difficult to change habits, And this is sort of a lifestyle that we've become accommodated to. And how can we nudge behavior and get people to, and get ourselves to take small steps in the right direction now, while the action is really needed. And it's particularly when it comes to transportation, which is the largest emitter of, on a U.S. countrywide basis. It's the largest sector when it comes to carbon emissions, #1. And it's also been the most difficult sector for us as on an individual, company, and municipal level to reduce emissions. And electrical vehicles being the main answer, but Tesla vehicles seem incredible, and I want one as soon as it's available for me, and I have enough money for it. But it's a solution that has quite a few years to go before we're going to see, all the cars, the majority of the cars on the road actually being electric. In the meantime, our goal is to get people to sort of take a closer look, especially when they're at the gas pump, they're filling up their gasoline. And I know some of us experience maybe a little bit of guilt at this moment. We understand, yeah, I have to do this, and I wish I didn't have to, but I have to. I'm not going to give up my car. And the smallest of that point is you just pay a little bit extra. That money goes to our organization. We are a nonprofit organization, and then we fund the tree planting programs that offset your carbon footprint. And I don't know.
And that's what you do.
Yeah, that's what I do.
David Kucha, everybody. All right, I have some questions because I want to understand how this works a little bit more. So basically, I go into a gas station. I'm gonna fill up my car. Yep. How do I participate in this? Like, how does it work? Like, where is it? Particular gas stations? How does it happen?
Great. So the original vision of how this would happen was we were at a gas pump one day and we were filling up and we were like, if this gas pump could just ask me if I wanted to offset my carbon footprint right now, I would say yes, and I wish I could. And how can we do that? And so we embarked on this journey. It's myself and 2 other close friends. 3 of us have been working on this for the last 2 years. And so after a lot of dead ends and no's and difficulties, we decided that trying to get this option on the gas pump was difficult. And we found a way to bypass that option. We decided to create a debit card that you can connect to your existing checking account. It's completely free. There's no charges associated with it other than the 10 cents extra that you pay per gallon when you buy gasoline with our debit card. It's a green gas card. I believe I have it right here in my pocket.
Very lovely shade of green.
Yeah.
Smart by you guys to go with the green.
Absolutely. But I'll add, we've recently revisited the on-pump possibility, and we have gotten an agreement from a gas station chain in Western Mass to allow us to pilot this option on the pump.
So is this like, when you say on the pump, is this like I go to the pump and I can select like regular, premium, carbon neutral, or whatever?
Not quite. We actually originally toyed with the idea of it would be great if we could have our own button, but that's
logistically difficult.
That's not happening. But you know how sometimes you get prompted if you want to make a car wash perhaps, or just the regular prompt that comes up on the screen. Now it can be green gas.
And this is where? Western Massachusetts.
Western Mass. The gas station chain is called Sandry, and they have locations in Western Mass, some in Vermont, and a couple in New Hampshire as well.
I'm curious, just sort of, and no pressure, but like by sort of show of hands, how many people, if this was easy to do, would think they would find themselves doing it, at least some of the time, if not every time, right? Mm-hmm. Especially, I would imagine, if gas prices are low. Mm-hmm. I mean, the thing about gas prices is they're variable, right? So like, sometimes they're really high, sometimes they're really low, and I would imagine, especially when they're really low, people would be like, wow, 10 extra cents, totally offset my carbon footprint for this fill-up of my gas, plus it's still cheaper than it was 2 weeks ago, mm-hmm. right?
That's the goal. That's what that's what a lot of people do say. And to us, we want to make this as small of ask as possible while still doing enough good. There is a very interesting phenomenon in green consumerism, we'll call it, where it's called the attitude behavior gap, where many of us, when polled, will say, yes, of course, I would do that. That fits in line with my values and my morals. That's me. And then you notice what the actual statistics are when push comes to shove, it's time to put the money down. It can be a dramatic drop-off.
Okay, so let's assume that this crowd is not the kind of crowd that has that gap, that they're motivated. So how do I mean, if I want to get one of these debit cards, how do I do it? And also, can I sort of see or know how much money of mine is going into it? And how do I know how much I've contributed to this whole project?
Great. So you can go to our website, which is www.greengasmovement.org. Again, we are a nonprofit, so it's .org. And on our website, you can find a way to sign up for the card, and also we have an app offering where you can connect your existing card to an app that allows you to round up the spare change of your purchases to donate to make it even a little bit easier. And as far as you having a window into what exactly your individual impact is, the only way that we can give people a routine, up-to-date information on that is through monthly update emails where we can connect you on what you've been able to contribute to so far. But we've been in this startup phase for a while, and developing a back-end system like that is the goal that we're working towards next.
That's very cool.
And just to add a quick, we believe it's so important. We all want to know personally what it is that we're responsible for, and that connection is one of the key reasons I think will encourage people to break through the attitude-behavior gap.
So speaking of that, before I let you go, because I know that when you talked about your background and stuff, environmental issues are huge for you. Climate change is a big deal. While you have this company, this organization, I should say, since it's a nonprofit, that's working on attacking it from this sort of at the gas pump perspective, is there one or two things that you can share with us that you have learned over time are easy ways for us to start to bridge that gap that you're talking about? In terms of, I think you're right when you say something like, I know that taking a flight is really bad for the environment, but I still want to go see my buddy in London, and I love to go to London, so I'm still going to do that. But are there things that would be very, very easy for me to start doing that will have an impact, that is something simple that I can start to do to bridge that gap between my care for the environment and my behavior, which may be slowly destroying the environment?
Great question. First, I'll sort of give you three. And the first one being just spend a little bit more time in nature if you can. It's a self-serving thing. You want to get out and travel. But I think that connection with nature is something that is very grounding. You need to have the proper motivation when it comes to actually changing your behavior to do something about something as serious as climate change. So just know what's out there and maybe pay attention to, if you notice maybe you're seeing whatever damage is being done, you're like, okay, I noticed this matters to me. But as far as steps that you can take, and hopefully you take maybe public transportation to get there. I think your diet is a major one. So it's really tough for us to give up meat. We live in a really meat-loving culture here in the U.S., and I think as a child it was the same for me. I probably 2 to 3 meals a day included meat. And now, personally, I've been able to gradually, it's all about step-by-step, achievable small steps, I think. And so I would recommend anyone here in the audience who is used to eating meat every single day of the week or more than 1 meal per day, consider cutting that back by just one and seeing how that goes for you. And then over time, maybe you can do a bit more.
And is that just because raising livestock is just something that takes up a lot of resources?
It is.
And eating less meat is sort of a way of helping that not happen?
It is, exactly. So get a little bit scientific for you guys for a quick second. So for every 10 pounds of grass that a cow eats, it's 1 pound of cow meat. So if you can just eat, and this is true for any vegetable, and then once you go the next level up to an animal that's eating the plants. So it takes far less energy and water, particularly, to eat a vegetarian diet than it does a meat diet for that reason.
Fascinating. David Kuch, everybody. Let's hear it for him.
Thank you, guys.
So obviously, one of the things about the Red Sox is they're a team that is steeped in tradition, and a large part of that tradition, of course, is Fenway Park. And the very unique nature of this very old ballpark that we have and are really lucky to have here in Boston. Of course, there's probably no more dominant feature than the Green Monster, and the manual scoreboard right there on this Green Monster. And of course, that is operated by humans, including for more than 25 years, our next guest, who is going to talk to us a little bit about what that is like. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Christian Elias. Let's hear for him. How does one get the job that you had for 25 years? Like, how do you get that job?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having me here. Believe it or not,
Yes.
there are not a lot of speaking opportunities for former scorekeepers out there. So I'm honored to be here.
Well,
and,
we're honored to
thank you
have
for
you.
having me. I think, with anything with these kind of jobs, it's who you know. And I'm a local kid. I grew up in Belmont. And back in the day, I loved baseball. And I always wanted to walk on that hallowed ground, that turf at Fenway Park. Back in the old days, the accessibility to that ballpark and the field wasn't as it is today. And I remember asking my father, who has some connections, I said, geez, can I get on the grounds crew? I want to be on the ground crew for a summer. What kid doesn't want to work
raking dirt
in
between
the sun,
innings,
raking
cutting
dirt.
the grass?
And I think I had just turned 18 or I was 17, and he came back to me and he says, I can't get you on the ground crew, but how about being the scorekeeper? And I went, really? No, I don't want to do it. I even turned it down, and he said, well, I called in a favor, so you're going to do it for one summer. And 26 years later, I retired, having worked just shy of 1,900 games back there. So I've
Round of
spent
applause
more
for that.
time.
1,900 games.
I've spent more time in that little tin box than
Yeah.
anywhere else on this earth.
Maybe you know this, maybe you don't. Is there even a single Red Sox player that has ever played that many games for the franchise?
Well, I don't know about that. If there was, it's probably Carl Yastrzemski. And I would say yes, because they're playing 162 games
right.
a year. For the first 15 years, I didn't miss a game, and I was only working 81 games a year.
Well, that's all, just 81 games.
Yeah, just 81. So I don't know about 26 years, but in terms of games played or games worked, I think Yaz probably has me.
But it's close. It's basically you and Yaz. That's good company.
Hey, that's good company to be in.
So, can you just paint us the picture, just the general picture of what it looks like in there? For I'm guessing, has anybody been inside behind the Green Monster? 1, 2. Right. So most of us experience the Green Monster from the outside. Yeah. What does it even just look like back there?
Well, I hope I cleaned the place for you when you came to visit. It is similar to a subway station. It's underground, actually. Where we work, there's only one way to get on and in and out of the scoreboard, and it's by the field. It's on the field. There's no back door. There's no secret compartment. And we're
one
actually
door in and out. Same door in and out.
Same door right on the field, right as part of the scoreboard. We actually step down. We are below ground. So you step down into the scoreboard, and right above us is actually the sidewalk to Lansdowne Street. Is right above us. So that's a small, cool fact. But it's very, very narrow. There's no air conditioning. There's no heat. So April it works in our benefit because it cuts down on the wind. The scoreboard doesn't really allow that wind to whip in, and we pay for that in July and August. I didn't used to have to diet in the summer months because just standing back there in that extreme heat, I sweat the pounds off back there. But and then, of course, a lot of people ask, if there's a bathroom back. There are no facilities back there either. So very long, narrow,
Can you get
very
in and out
dusty.
there? Are you just you're there the whole game and you can't go?
Well, I didn't say that. I just said there's no bathroom facilities actually inside the scoreboard.
Okay, so hence the smell like a subway, right? Yeah.
Yeah, very similar.
So who's back there? Well, like what is the actual job? Who's back there? What are you doing during the course of a game?
So when I first started, there was just me and one other person. We became very, very close friends. You really have to be to spend 5 or 6 hours in this confined area with this person all the time. So it was just, when I first started up until 2003, it was just the two of us, and we never missed. Meaning, if we were sick, hungover, did not feel like making, it was not an option. We were there. And in fact, I went to school at the University of New Hampshire, and in April and September, I used to go to class in the morning, drive down the 80 to 90 miles, work the game, drive back up,
What?
go to class the next day, drive back down. But it was only for April and September for the home game, so it wasn't a long time.
You're essentially the Cal Ripken of scoreboard keepers.
Thank you, Edgar. You're too kind. Thank you.
Yeah.
But it is, so it was just the two of us, and it was really our job to keep track of the score of the Red Sox game, inning by inning, also the runs, hits, and errors. And then at that time, we kept track of the other games going on in the American
wow.
League. So Detroit at Kansas City, Baltimore at New York.
And how are you doing that? You got a radio on? You're
At that time, we had a phone, so it was just an in-house phone, and someone would call down the scores between innings. And as the years progressed and the new owners came in, 2003, they expanded the scoreboard and added a National League portion to it, which we couldn't access from the inside. So between innings, we then had to go out on the warning track, and it was like my own version of that game at Price is Right. I had a minute and a half to put all the right numbers in the right spot in front of 35,000 people and then scoop back inside the scoreboard. And then we sort of updated to a laptop, and we were getting the scores online. But I always joked around with the guys that worked for me towards the end and said, you guys don't know how good you have it. They could text their friends. We had a TV. They could call their friends and family. When I first started, there were no cell phones. There was that one house phone, and it couldn't call out. So for 3 to 4 hours, we were cut off from the world and society. We never went outside during the game. Once we were inside that scoreboard at 6:30, we didn't come out till after the game, and we were cut off from friends, family, everything for those 3.5, 4 hours.
That's crazy. What is it? Is it terrifying a little bit? Like, are you worried about making mistakes? Are you thinking about any of that, like putting a number in upside down? Has any of that kind of stuff happened? Over 26 years, has it all happened?
How long is the segment? We made a lot of mistakes. It was a different time back then. I was very young. We always used to joke that we were on everything except roller skates back in the early years there.
Ah.
And so mistakes did happen. And as we started to do the National League games, it could get pretty hectic on a Friday night.
Yeah,
if
it sounds like a lot between innings. Yeah,
yeah, going
you're
on at
physically
the same time.
what are these things? Are they tiles? Like, how are you?
They're metal plates,
Yeah.
and I don't know the exact size, but we made plenty of mistakes. One time we had a game in the Metrodome in Minnesota and a rain delay, and of course everyone knows that they played in a dome for many years there, so a rain delay was
probably not
impossible.
a rain delay, yeah.
And then there was a funny story where the Mariners were in town with Ken Griffey Jr., and before we would go into the scoreboard, part of our pregame duties were to set up the outside of the board, which meant we would put these huge metal plates with the city names on them.
Team names, yeah.
The team names, and we would match them up. So if Detroit was playing Cleveland, and then New York and Baltimore and Seattle and Oakland, and we would put them in order and write it down, so from the inside we would know which games we would put the right numbers in. Well, between the time we put those city plates out one night and we came in and we just started reading the paper, and all of a sudden they started calling down the scores, and we thought we were putting up the right scores. About the third inning, Haywood Sullivan called down. He was a minority owner at the time, and he started yelling, and he said he was Haywood Sullivan, the owner, and we thought it was nobody called us.
Prank call.
Yeah, nobody ever called us, so we hung up on him 2 or 3 times. Just that's a mistake, and we went back to reading the Herald. And finally, our boss called up and said, don't hang up, what are you guys doing? And we said, what are you talking about? And he said, the numbers are all wrong, you got them in different teams. And we couldn't believe that we would maybe off one team, but not every team. And so in the middle of it, and this was unheard of at the time, in the middle of the game, between innings, I had to sheepishly take the ladder out on the warning track and walk out and change all these city plates, and we couldn't believe it. And I was like, I can't believe we were this bad. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see Ken Griffey Jr. laughing and pointing at me. And so what happened was, when we went inside without us knowing, he switched all the city plates on us. And the next day, him and all those guys came out and they gave us a hard time, and it was all in good fun and stuff like that, because we couldn't believe we made that bad a mistake.
You got punked by a Hall of Famer.
We got punked by a Hall of Famer.
That's
He's
pretty
a great
cool.
guy. Yeah.
So that sort of makes me wonder about the interaction with the players. I mean, obviously, like, if you're talking about a player on an opposing team who's kind of yucking it up with you guys, what kind of interaction did you have with Red Sox players and players from these other teams? Like, how much do you get to know them or see them or any of that?
I ended up getting to know and see and meet almost every player from the opposing team. Not so much the Red Sox, only because by the time I got in to set up the Green Monster, the Red Sox had already finished taking batting practice. And one of the great things is they were more interested in me and us than we were in them. So they would always come in, and a great tradition of the Green Monster was that players would come in and sign, and they would sign their name. And so every time...
Sign it where?
They would sign inside. The back of the Green Monster is just concrete. And so we would have chalk, and they would sign their name, and it became a tradition. And what was great about this tradition is that it was passed down. It wasn't about sponsors or the team or the organization asking them to do it or anything. It was a tradition that was passed down from player to player, generation to generation. So I can't tell you how many times Bryce Harper would come in the scoreboard and said, Jordan Zimmerman said, the first guy I got to look up when I come to Fenway for the first time is you. And so that was how I got to meet a lot of the players. And they were
When would they
always
come in?
nice.
Before the game?
They would come in during batting practice.
Okay.
So the opposing team was taking batting practice. I'm there setting up. The door's open. They're coming in. They're signing. They're asking me questions. And it's changed a little bit, but I really found that was a great tradition, just because it was just started and kept up by the players themselves. I would never ask them to come in. I would, they became a bother after a while,
You're trying to do your job, for God's sake. You're
but
hungover. You're in
most
this
of them,
spot.
Yeah, but most of them could not have been nicer, but you have to understand, I wasn't asking them for anything, autographs or pictures. I was on the field, so they were very relaxed. I didn't pose any kind of threat. And quite the opposite. Over many years, I became friendly with all of them, and Mariano Rivera. And if we have time, I'll tell you a quick story about this. During the '99 All-Star Game, which was by far my favorite weekend at Fenway Park inside the scoreboard, the National League was set to take their team picture in front of the scoreboard. All these big stars. Interleague play was fairly new at the time. So a lot of the big National League stars were at Fenway Park for the first time. So it was a big deal. And they couldn't find Tony Gwynn. He's passed away, the late Tony Gwynn, Hall of Fame outfielder for the San Diego Padres. And they couldn't find him. And they looked in the clubhouse. They looked in the American League clubhouse. They called his hotel. If he left, they couldn't find him. They tried everything. Ironically, he was 15 feet away from where all the other players were lining up for the picture inside the Green Monster talking to me. And he was just a student of the game, a history of the Green Monster, and he couldn't have been nicer. He signed the wall, Tony Gwynn, 8-time NL batting champ and counting, which was great. And was the first player who ever asked my permission if he could take his picture with me. So it was pretty cool, and that was a really fond memory I have.
Speaking of not being able to find somebody, and it turns out they're in the Green Monster. There's a famous Manny Ramirez moment, right, where the inning we're in the middle of an inning, and the Red Sox only had 8 players on the field. What? Now you just said there's no facilities there, and the thing I've always heard is that Manny went into the Green Moss to go to the bathroom, and that's what happened there. Sounds like maybe that's not what happened, or
It didn't happen that time.
Oh.
It didn't happen that time.
Good
Boy, do I
Lord.
miss Manny. He was a lot of fun. He was very good to us. It's funny because there was a Red Sox outfielder back in the day named Mike Greenwell, and we couldn't get him to stop talking baseball when he would come back during pitching changes to visit us. And it's funny because Manny would never talk baseball. Big home run, Manny would come back the next inning, and I'd say, geez, what did you hit, a curveball? What was that, a slider? And he would look at me and just shake his head. You know, he could not be bothered with talking baseball, but wow, what a hitter. But that time...
What would he talk about?
He loved classic cars, and he's a big fan of women, and classic cars, and did I mention women? And so that's really the two subjects we stuck to. We didn't get out of his comfort zone there for
Smart play on your part,
for a
I
few
think.
years.
Yeah.
We went to his strength. But that one particular time, what happened, and he had come back there 100,000 times before and after. But usually when Terry Francona, the manager at the time, would come out to the pitching mound, when the manager comes out, that indicates that there's going to be a pitching change.
Right, otherwise you send the pitching coach out, right? Usually.
Exactly. So Terry Francona comes out, and Manny can hear that familiar knock on the door. Hey, Chris, how you doing? I think we gave him some fruit. He always ate fruit between innings back there. And he sat down, and we started shooting the breeze because we thought we had 5 or 6 minutes or 8 minutes for the relief pitcher to come in and take his warm-ups. And, you know, the sounds of the game. I almost, at the end, for many years, didn't need to watch a pitch. I could tell just by listening to the crowd and the music and the PA announcer what was happening. So I could keep score, really, without my eyes, with my ears. And so that time, Francona didn't take the pitcher out. So Francona runs off the field, and then we heard this kind of abnormal cheer. And the only thing we thought was a fan came running onto the field. That was the only thing that it possibly could be. That's when the crowd gets riled up and the security guard tackles the person. But it wasn't. It was everybody yelling, "Where's Manny?" And so we looked up. We both took a quick peek out the slot, and the pitcher was in his windup. And Manny jumped up. We both screamed expletives. And then he ran out, and the crowd cheered, and they talked about it on TV. And so that's what happened that one time that we're known for.
What does the game look like from that spot? What can you see through that slot that you talk about?
I think that's the biggest, over the years, the biggest misconception about the scoreboard is that we can't see the field or the game. It's really an incredible view. I do miss the view. We're right on the field, and with Fenway Park and the Green Monster being so close in left field, where I was standing was basically where other left fielders are playing in other stadiums. We're that close. We can see everything except the center field scoreboard. We really, if you're a fan of the game, it's a fantastic vantage point. We can hear the outfielders talking to each other. I miss it. You know, I had season tickets for 26 years. Plenty of leg room, my own cooler. I do miss that part of it. I don't miss the traffic, the late nights, the rain delays, which was the bane of our existence. But I do miss it. But it was a great view, and we really had a great vantage point.
So I wonder if we can do some quick rapid fire stuff. I mean, and I can imagine the number of games you're talking about. There must be so many moments to sort through, and also so many moments that have happened that you could not remember in a million years. But can you give me sort of, if we go rapid fire, what's sort of the first thing that comes to your mind when I say best moment back there? Best moment.
99 All-Star Game, home run hitting derby, keeping track of the home runs.
Worst moment back there. Lowest point.
Forget the year, rain delay. About 3-hour rain delay against the Milwaukee Brewers. Jeff Reardon was the closer for the Red Sox. 1 pitch away from going home. Gives up a game-tying home run. The sky's open. Rain delay for 3 hours. He ruined my weekend.
Weirdest thing you can remember happening back there? Just sort of like a totally bizarre, weird moment.
One day, Troy O'Leary was the left fielder. He was a left fielder between Greenwell and Manny, I believe. I was working a game by myself, which rarely happened, except I wasn't by myself. I had 3 furry friends back there with me that when you're by yourself can kind of freak you out a little bit in a confined space. So my solution was to bang the wall with a broomstick to create noise. And about after 2 innings of that, Troy O'Leary came back and he poked his head in and he said, "Hey, Chris, are you okay?" And I told him what was happening, and I never saw him again. That night or even after that, that was the last time Troy O'Leary ever ventured back to near the scoreboard. So that was an odd night.
You ever get scared back there, overwhelmed, any of that kind of stuff?
No, I don't think so. No, scared or overwhelmed. I mean, it was frustrated for long games and things, rain delays. But no, it was a wonderful opportunity, a chance of a lifetime. And I'm just so grateful that I was able to do that. And but scared or overwhelmed? No. I mean, once you have it down, the game becomes, it kind of, you know what you're doing. And, I could do it with my eyes closed.
I want to end on this note because it's funny. Like I'm not from here. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I was still living in Philadelphia when 2004 came around, and the Red Sox broke the curse after 86 years, right? And it's kind of I feel like we have enough distance from that now, and the Red Sox have been successful enough since then, and not to mention all the other success in this town in recent years. Me being in Philly at that time and watching what was happening in Boston and at Fenway, and I had never been there before and all that, the Red Sox were such a historic team. The curse was such a big deal. Fenway was such an important part of baseball history. I remember the whole city of Philadelphia pulling for the Red Sox in 2004, and like it happened, and you were there. What was that 2004 experience like? The season, the postseason, the World Series, whatever it is. What was that like being a part of that?
Well, truth be told, I do not have fond memories of that season.
Really?
A poorly kept secret is I'm a diehard Yankee fan. So.
And there's at least one other Yankee fan willing to admit it in the crowd.
I'm from here. I grew up a Yankee fan. My father brought me up to be a Yankee fan. So those were some difficult times, and the support groups have helped. But I don't like to focus on that. But it was a wild ride. Looking back on it, it was to be part of history like that. It was exciting. I still haven't lived it down from a lot of people, but
I can imagine, yeah.
But
were you tempted to switch the score? Like, no, the Yankees are actually winning this game here.
Prior to that year, I didn't even need to. I didn't feel the need to do any of that. So I was probably in shock, like most of the rest of the world. But looking back on it, to be part of something that historic is really cool, and I was proud to be a part of it.
You still go to games?
I retired after the 2016 season. I went to one game last year, and it was tough. I wasn't planning on going, and I miss watching the game from my little perch back there. So I think right now I'll stick to the TV.
What do you do now?
Well, I'm starting my 18th season working for Dawn Law and Live Nation in the concert business. So I run the VIP ticket programs for Blue Hills Bank Pavilion, the Xfinity Center, the House of Blues. So I've been in the concert business for 18 years.
So you only take really cool jobs, essentially, is what you do.
That's it. I've been very blessed and very lucky.
Christian Elias, everybody, let's hear it for him. And when we think green, we think money. And as we've said, we've got our last speaker tonight, certified financial planner. But the thing I'm really interested in is the fact that she is instrumental in an organization called the Society of Grown-Ups. That is a name I really love, and I want to hear about more about what they do. So please welcome to the stage, Rachel Rabinovich.
I have been working in financial services for about 13 years. I started my career at Ameriprise Financial, and I was there for about 10. And I've been with Society of Grown-Ups for about 3 years now. When I came to Society of Grown-Ups, we were doing one-to-one financial planning appointments, and we offered live classes in our space in Brookline. About a year and a half ago, we actually closed the space, and we pivoted to become a digital financial wellness platform where we offer online classes, financial calculators, and blogs about a variety of financial and lifestyle topics. I personally am a poster child for financial planning. I never set out to become a financial planner. It wasn't part of my plan. This is my second career. I actually started out in early childhood education and in psychology. I've also was never financially literate when I was younger. That evolved over years from having made some hard mistakes and finding myself kind of paralyzed financially and working my way out of it. So I started out, my undergraduate degree was in psychology and early childhood education, and then I got a master's degree in counseling psychology. My goal was to be a school counselor, and I was actually certified to do that. But when I finished grad school, I went to work in an inpatient child psychiatric unit. And yeah, exactly. That is it. But after my daughter was born, I left that. It was too intense. And I went to work in early childhood education as a teacher, and then later as a program director. When my daughter was young, we were basically stuck in a financial quagmire. We were bogged down with student loan debt, and we were still renting. We weren't able to save for a house. We had credit card debt, and it just felt like we were treading water and not getting anywhere. And I actually remember feeling a lot of anxiety on a month-to-month basis. It felt to me like we were living paycheck to paycheck. So we bit the bullet and we hired a financial planner to come in and help us. And she was an absolute drill sergeant. She was scary, actually. She made us write down for an entire month every penny that came into the house and every penny that went back out again. And after that month, she went away and she did her work, analyzed our situation, and I was convinced, I was absolutely convinced she was going to tell one of us that we needed to get a second job, or we needed to sell a car, or file for bankruptcy. And I didn't really even have a conception of what that meant. But that's not what happened at all. She actually came back to us and was able to identify where we were being wasteful. And she was able to help us get organized and get a plan and start moving forward. And honestly, within a few short years, we actually were able to buy that house and pay off our student loans. And we were even able to start a 529 plan. It was an incredibly life-changing experience. So when my daughter turned 11, she was entering 6th grade, I left early childhood at that point. And I worked for a very short period of time for a real estate appraiser. And then I was approached by a financial advisor from what was then American Express. It's now Ameriprise Financial. And he was looking for a part-time administrative assistant, which I thought would be perfect for me. I was able to work mother's hours. I could be home in the afternoon when my daughter got home from school. And sadly, I was actually making about as much money working part-time for him than I did full-time as a program director. Yeah. He said to me at the time that he will always need an administrative assistant. So if I wanted to keep doing that forever, that was perfectly fine with him. but that if I wanted something more, if I actually wanted to learn to become an advisor, and based on my background, he kind of thought that it might be a good fit for me. He actually had a background in special education before he became an advisor. He said he would train me. He would pay for my certifications and provide me with the needed experience so that I could do that. Well, I took him up on his offer. I studied for my Series 7, which is the license to buy and sell securities. I got my Series 66, which allowed me to manage investments, and I got my insurance license. So I became what was called a paraplanner at the time. So that's somebody who can do trades and help with the financial planning under the supervision of a financial planner. I really enjoyed it a lot, surprisingly. I did surprise myself. I actually started writing more and more of the financial plans, and I really loved the interactions with the clients. So when my daughter went to college, I returned to a full-time work schedule, and my boss appointed me as a financial planner. And I was an associate financial advisor. That was my title. And I got my own book of business. I had my own clients. And I studied for and earned my CFP, which is the Certified Financial Planner credential, which was probably just as hard as my master's degree, to be honest with you. I was happy. I was content. I wasn't looking to leave. And then I got a phone call from a recruiter from MassMutual who found me on LinkedIn. And he started telling me about this crazy learning initiative out of MassMutual called Society of Grown-Ups, and how they were setting out to disrupt the financial services industry. And they were working with millennials and just trying to do everything differently. And they were looking for CFPs. And I thought, this honestly sounds too good to be true, but I had to listen. I had to hear him out. And the rest was history. Coming to Society of Grown-Ups for me was the culmination of everything I have done in my adult life. It's education, it was counseling, it was financial planning, and it was really my dream job. It still is my dream job. But I have been able to utilize the early work experiences I had in education and counseling. I was able to utilize the wisdom that I had gained from my own personal financial journey and all of the credentials and knowledge that I gained at Ameriprise. And I was able to pair it with this really refreshing, new approach to financial planning that involves your values and your goals, what's important to you, and really nothing else. So I'd like to share with you a little bit about why thinking about finances through the lens of values is inspirational to me, why I think it's important, and why we do it at Society of Grown-Ups. First of all, having meaningful goals that you set for yourself gives you a tangible target to work toward, and it makes it more likely that you're going to reach it. Aligning your goals to your life and what's important to you is far more important and effective than doing what the outside world thinks is important. Let me give you an example of that. We had a grown-up come into our space. Now, we call our clients grown-ups. And she came in to see a financial planner. It wasn't me, it was somebody else. But she said she wanted to buy a house. That was her big goal. So after spending some time with the planner, she examined her goals and her values a little bit more closely and realized that she actually really didn't want to buy a house. She just thought she needed to buy a house. It was what was expected of her. What she really wanted to do was to travel more, to live in different places and experience the world before settling down. And she kind of needed to know that that was okay. So she kind of pivoted and made that her goal and started working towards that. Knowing your values and your goals really allows you to make better financial decisions for yourself. And they can be as small as how you might spend your discretionary income on a monthly basis. Like, do I want to buy those pair of shoes, or would I rather go to this concert? Or it can be a larger decision. Like in my own life, we had money set aside for a kitchen renovation. And the timing happened to coincide with my daughter's senior year of high school. So we basically had to sit down and really think about whether or not this was the best use of that money. And we realized that what was more important to us was to help her out with her tuition. Because I'm telling you, we had PTSD from our days of being bogged down in student loans, and we didn't want that to happen to her. So the kitchen waited. Kitchen waited another 7 years. But we're really happy with that decision. So, at Society of Grown-Ups, we have something that's called a values deck. You can see it up there, and I have it right here. And it's a deck of cards that has a value written on each one, and there's a brief explanation. And it's an exercise we do with our clients to help them start to think about what's important to them. And what we do is we have this exercise where you sort through the card deck several times until you come up with your top 5 values. And it's hard. It's really hard to get to that 5, but it's actually a lot of fun too. But once you have your values articulated and you're starting to think about what the goals are that are important to you, you can start to try to align them. So, for instance, I've got a couple of cards here. Say you decide that stability is important to you. Maybe you want to buy a house. So what can you do to, what kind of actions can you take to get to that goal? So an action might look like checking your credit score and understanding why it's important and how to take care of it. It could mean understanding how much you need for a down payment or the closing cost and how you're going to get there. Or it could mean how much of a mortgage can you really afford. We actually have a calculator right on our website to help you with that. Or maybe you chose freedom. So maybe you really don't want that house right now, but you're feeling really bogged down by student loans and you're feeling blocked and you can't move ahead. So what might you do with that? So one thing to do is take an assessment of all your loans. Write them all down. Figure out what the length of, the term is, what the interest rates are, what your monthly payments are. Are they private? Are they federal? Check your spending plan. See if there are places in your monthly expenses where you can actually cut back and start to put more towards those student loans. Figure out a plan for how you're going to tackle those loans. Which loans are you going to prioritize paying down first? Or maybe you need to relook at your repayment options. Maybe none of them are working for you. So, having your goals and your values starting to align can be really, really empowering, but it also can feel kind of overwhelming. Like you have all this wonderful new information about yourself, but you don't really know quite what to do with it and how to handle it. So progress can actually come in very slow and incremental steps, but they're actually quite powerful. And they can really start to help you stabilize and build your financial security, and you can start to take some small actions now. So some of those actions might be, again, I mentioned it earlier, but kind of assessing where you are, knowing what you make, what you spend, what you save on a monthly basis, quantifying your goals, understanding how much you need to reach that goal and maybe what your timeline is for it, and taking small actions like setting up an auto pay for monthly savings so that it becomes a line item expense and you're not even thinking about it anymore. Or paying your bills on time to make sure that your credit score is as strong as it can be. Or finding out where in your expenses you can cut back so that you can start to reach your goals in other ways so that you can reallocate that money. All of this really, resonated with me on a professional level and on a personal level. It was a bit of a slow process. I felt after we went through assessing, I felt raw. It was painful. But honestly, ultimately, it was really, really life-changing. It was very powerful. And it gave my husband and I a real sense of peace and control, knowing where we were, knowing where we wanted to go, and how we were going to get there. It was life-changing. It was wonderful. Now, I actually brought some financial, the values decks with me. We have them down here. Molly and Josh have them over there. So if anybody is interested in taking a look at them, if you want to take any of them home, that would be great. They're really fun to do with a partner or with your family or friends. And I would also recommend you doing periodically, every few months to see how your goals change. So really, just to wrap up, figure out in a conclusion, just think about what's important to you. Think about what you want to work for, where you want to spend your money, and how you're going to get there. And that's about it.
Great.
Thank you.
Rachel Rabinovich. Before I let you down off the stage, a couple of questions. I'm feeling like I'm not panicking.
Well, good. Don't panic. That's our mantra.
And I want to be an adult. And it sounds like your services can help me. How do I find out more about, the Society of Grownups?
So that's great. You can find us on societyofgrownups.com. We have, like I mentioned, we have a number of blogs about financial and lifestyle topics. We have financial calculators, and we have classes. And if there's anything that anybody wants to know more about that I talked about tonight, we actually have a class for it.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Very cool. And you talked a number of, you sort of mentioned this spending plan idea.
Yeah.
If I want to just even begin to get my head around a spending plan, how do I do that? What's my sort of best first step?
Yeah, that's
Get
great.
one of your deck of cards?
Well, that's a good idea. But a few things to do are, first of all, write everything down.
Socratic.
Yep,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
Write everything down. Again, what you're making and what you're spending on a monthly basis. And then start to track it. Track your spending. So you can do that paper and pencil. You can do that on an Excel spreadsheet or a spending tracker app like Mint. I've actually been amazed at the number of people who actually rather write it down and use
Fascinating.
spreadsheets rather than apps.
Yeah.
You'd think otherwise, but no.
Yeah.
And then start to think about bucketing your spending into 3 different categories.
And they are?
Needs,
Needs.
which are your essential expenses. Those are the
like
things. Rent, food.
Mortgage.
Yep, the things you need to keep the roof over your head.
Food, clothing,
food
and
on
shelter.
the table. Yep.
Right.
Your debt's paid. That's an
Sure.
essential. Yeah. Your goals. So what are those things you're working for? Is it, paying extra to your debts to get rid of them, or are you saving for a house or a trip, retirement? And then your wants. And I think this is something that's really important to remember. We're all about kind of like the anti-budget.
Yeah.
Wants are really important. Those are the things
Yeah.
that bring you joy. And you'll hear a lot of times, I think, a lot of, the financial talking heads will preach.
Like, you don't need to go out to dinner. You don't need to do this, right?
Yeah, they preach austerity.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think austerity works. I think everybody needs to have a little bit of joy in their life, and you need to really think about the things that you enjoy so much and make room for it in your budget. And then prioritize your spending so that you're spending and saving where you want.
Rachel Rabinovich, let's hear it for her. Thank you so much. And thank you to